Welcome to West Indies on 99.94, the home of cricket audio. I'm your co-host, Machel St. Patrick, here from the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And with me as ever is my fellow co-host, Santokie Nagilendran, also from the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. We are your home for West Indies content, and we'll be right here several times every week discussing them. You can find us in your favorite podcast apps, on YouTube, or in our 99.94 app. Thanks for joining Cricket's conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about CPL 2022. Santokie, take it away.
Yeah, the biggest party in sport has arrived once again. The Caribbean Premier League 2022 edition is up and running. And those listening to the audio or those watching on the visual, Machel seems calm and collected at the moment. He's disguising the fact that his beloved Jamaica Tallawahs have got off to a 100% start, winning their first game against last year's champions, St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots. So we're here to break down the early stages of the CPL and kind of look at teams' performances, bearing in mind there is a T20 World Cup for the West Indies coming up. Who's thrown their name into the hat? Who's been underperforming? We're here to analyse it all and review the early start of the tournament. So, Machel, it's only right. Let's mention the Patriots then, because they won it last year. They've got off to an abysmal start, losing their first two games against the Tallawahs and the Barbados Royals. From observing the games, where has it gone wrong? Is it the batting? Is it the bowling? Is it a combination of both? How have they managed to dramatically fall from last season?
Yeah, I think if you look at the first two games thus far, so the defeat to the Tallawahs, the defeat to the Royals, the one consistent, in fact, there's been two consistent things that I've noticed, possibly even three, but the glaring issues have been the fielding. Across those first two games, they've dropped 9 catches. And it doesn't matter what cricket club you are. If you're Dog and Duck Cricket Club, if you're Kensington Cricket Club, the Melbourne Cricket Club, whoever you may be, if you drop 9 catches across 2 matches, you're going to lose. The phrase catches wins matches exists for a reason. And the Patriots have been woeful in the field. And credit where it's due to the Tallawahs and the Royals, they've punished them for it. So first things first, it's a fielding issue. Secondly, I think if you look at the bowling performances of the Patriots, they've just given away too many extras, too many wide deliveries, too many leg byes, etc. And those things all add up. Will it be enough for them to not make the Final Four? No, I think we've seen teams make the Final Four before, Santokie, when they've only won 3 games out of 10. So I'm not going to fall into this trap of saying let's write off the St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots. But you lose 2 out of your first 2 games. And remember, Santokie, this is the St. Kitts home leg of the tournament. For those of you who aren't au fait with how the Caribbean Premier League is working this year, we're going to 4 destinations. So the first section of the tournament is in St. Kitts. St. Kitts have got all the night games. So the fans are coming out for the St. Kitts games. They're not playing in the morning. They've got the night games. When we move to Trinidad, the Trinbago Knight Riders will get the night games. When we go to St. Lucia, the Kings will get the night games. And then when we end in Guyana, the Amazon Warriors will get the night games. So what compounds this, Santokie, is not only have they looked bad, but they've looked bad with the home advantage.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's important to note, whereas Trinbago in the past have been dominant throughout tournaments, winning, 2020, they won every single game. Last season, if you look at the Patriots, they actually lost 4 games in the group stages. They won 6. They qualified in 3rd position, but then they came up clutch in the playoffs and the final with those performances. And I think the big players they've been missing so far, obviously Dominic Drakes and Fabian Allen as well. Fabian Allen, I think, was a big loss for them, obviously going back to Jamaica, because those are players who offer stuff with the bat and the ball to give you that option. And also overseas-wise as well, Nassim Shah last year was a good performance. So for me, they've kind of lost it, and they've gambled on inexperienced players. So for instance, Daryl Brevis, who's shown talent, but he hasn't got that consistency yet. So they're kind of in a weird place where they've got veteran players who are underperforming, and then you've got younger players as well who haven't quite proven themselves. And obviously, Evan Lewis didn't play the last game either. So it's a combination of factors. As you said, Mash, we can't write them off now. It's only 2 games, but it is concerning in front of their home fans when teams are traditionally is where they pick up points. They are sort of struggling. But one name, Mash, you know what? One name we mentioned a few episodes ago, Spiceman, Andre Fletcher, discarded from the West Indies, set up for the past year. He struck with a vengeance in the last game against Barbados. 81 at the top of the order of 55 balls. To put it into context, the next highest scorer was Josh De Silva with 19. So Fletcher sort of carried that innings. Do you think Fletcher has put his name in the hat for a selection recall for the World Cup?
He has to have done, surely. And I go back to something that you tweeted on our Caribbean Cricket Podcast handle, on our Twitter handle, earlier today. The West Indies must confirm who our 15-man squad for the T20 World Cup. We've got to confirm it on the 16th of September. That's basically 2 weeks away, right? So anybody who wasn't part of our T20 summer only has about, 5 or 6 games max to really lay claim to say, I have done enough, whether through sheer weight of runs, whether through an amazing strike rate, whether through the wickets column, to force my way into the reckoning in spite of not having played for the West Indies this year. Now, we know that there is an opening problem for the West Indies. And when we say opening, sorry, that sounds harsh. We know there's a backup openers problem. I think it's fair to say that Brandon King and Carl Mayers can book their place on the plane. But should one of them get injured, you've said it so many times, Santokie, we should not be in a position, with respect, where Shamar Brooks is the backup opener. Now, we know that Spiceman is an opener. We know that he has the ability to go at a good strike rate. We also know that he's got the ability to be a wicket keeper if needs be. For me, Santokie, he's in the conversation.
100%. And the fact he's played in the Big Bash League in Australia, he knows the conditions. As you said, he's 33, 34 years old, but he's got so much experience and that ability to perform. For me, he's a backup opener, and he's a backup opener who will put pressure on Mayers and King at the top of the order. I think Shamar Brooks is the type of backup opener. He's not putting pressure on. He's just there in case one of them gets injured. Whereas with Fletcher, you've got a viable contender to sort of step in. So for me, I think that innings was a big statement to come from Fletcher so early in the tournament. And you can only imagine now, as you said, there's only 2 weeks until the squad has to be finalised. Fletcher's got to be in there, surely.
Yeah, and it's worth saying as well, and maybe this is a good point to pivot to, if we go back to, in fact, our last episode when we spoke about the 60, Fletcher came off a good 60 tournament. In fact, he was named man of the tournament. So in fairness, all Fletcher's doing is carrying on the good form from the 60. So this shouldn't be seen as a standalone CPL knock. This is a good stretch of form for Fletcher, and I do believe the 60 should count. And speaking of the 60, Santokie, if we can talk about my beloved Jamaica Tallawahs. Now, I'm going to admit it. I'm going to hold my hands up. 3 months ago or 2 months ago, when we did episode 70 of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, we had young Samuel Badri on the show with us, and we did a CPL preview show. And I openly said on that show that I thought Tallawahs were going to be useless this year. But we started with a bang, Santokie. And what's quite noticeable for me is the top wicket taker for the Tallawahs in that game versus the Patriots was Nicholson Gordon. Again, people, if you're yet to listen to episode 10 of West Indies on 99.94, go back and listen to it, and you'll hear myself and Santokie say Nicholson Gordon has probably played his way into selection contention for the Tallawahs based on his performances in the 60. So I think it's just worth echoing again, Santokie, that for all of those naysaying the 60 tournament, the proof is in the pudding in so much as Tallawahs selected Jangu. They selected Nicholson Gordon, and neither one of us two would ever have said that 2 months ago, yeah, Nicholson Gordon and Amir Jangu will start in the Tallawahs' first game.
Yeah, 100%. Those are 2 names we would never have thought of, particularly Amir Jangu, sort of come out of nowhere. So as we said, the 60, for all the criticism it got, it's essentially been a short but much needed platform into the CPL, just to give those players who haven't, because remember, for a lot of men's players in the region, they don't get that much game time or match experience. So it's just provided them to put their hands in the air while the senior players sort of sit out for preparation. So it's been beneficial in that way. But Mash, one guy who's going to be sweating, a Jamaican, I'll tell you that is John Campbell, because Kennard Lewis in that first game, valiant test knock, 48 of 46 balls from Kennard Lewis. But to his credit, Jamaica managed to pull it off. Do you think, now let's get this from a Jamaican fan, do you think in the context of that victory, Kennard Lewis played a smart innings, or was it still a match-losing knock that was just saved by Rovman Powell blitzing it towards the end?
It's got to be match losing, Santokie. It's got. I mean, obviously we won. So it's not match losing. But okay, let me put it in context. Against the Barbados Royals, the Spiceman, when he got to his 50, was 50 off 41 balls. That's match losing because you can't be out there for 41 balls and you're only going at like 108. But over the next 11, 12, 15 balls, whatever it was, he then blitzed the bowling again and finished on 81 off 55 balls.
Yeah.
I've got no problem with that. So you can stay in for a long time as long as you accelerate in the back end. And that's what Spiceman did versus the Royals. You can't face 46 balls at the top of an innings and end on 48 and get 48. That's I call that a soak up innings. And it's only, like you say, if it's not for Brandon King's, I can't remember what he got now. Was it 70 odd or was it 80 odd?
89 or 57.
89. If it wasn't for Brandon King's 89 and then Rovman Powell at the death with the 30 or 15, yeah, the Tallawahs don't make that imposing total. So in any other context, that's match losing. Some West Indian fans would probably say, oh, he played a good anchor innings, but that he wasn't trying to play a good anchor innings. And in fact, that's not Kennard Lewis's game. Kennard Lewis normally goes at 140 strike rate if he's facing that many balls. So it was a really bad knock that was rescued by the other players around him. Sometimes the volume of runs you score in T20 isn't what matters. It's how you score them as opposed to how many you actually get. So the Tallawahs kind of got away with it in that sense.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, Kennard Lewis, he's known as someone who's played in T20 leagues around the world. He's known as someone that gets off the mark very quickly. We know he had a poor 60 tournament. He didn't get any big scores. I think it was single-digit scores, if I remember correctly. So maybe he just lost his confidence and he thought, let me play it out, although it's kind of backfired. I know there have been a lot of murmurings in the past about Kennard Lewis getting a West Indies sort of call-up, but you think that international, considering he hasn't played that much cricket really for someone he's 30, 31, he hasn't played that much cricket. So I think international level at this point is just beyond him. Well, as you said, brilliant knock from Brandon King at the top of the order, sort of cemented his place as West Indies incumbent opener. And then Rovman Powell coming in later. You do feel sorry though for, say, a Shamar Brooks, because he's someone who's, as you said, he's battling to get into the side as a backup opener, but he's not opening for the Jamaica Tallawahs, and coming later down the order, he might not necessarily get to face that many balls.
Yep. He was perfect example, Santokie. That first game, he just wasn't needed. King and Lewis had put on 102, I think, without loss at the beginning innings. Once you're 102 and you've set the platform, why are you bringing in Shamar Brooks? It was obvious that you then have to go to Rovman Powell. And after Rovman Powell, you have to go to Fabian Allen. And even he wasn't in the squad for the game because he was injured, but even then you're going to Raymond Reefer and an Amir Jangu before you're going to Shamar Brooks. And that just echoes the point that you're making, Santokie. How then have the West Indies got Shamar Brooks in the side? Like that doesn't make... And we're not here to dig out Shamar Brooks. Shamar Brooks is a nice touch player. But if in your own franchise team, a man will look at you and go, nah, we can't bring you in because you ain't got the game to cash in at this point in time, then I'm not sure how... Do you follow my reasoning, Santokie?
I have doubts whether Shamar Brooks will go to the World Cup. Obviously, that's another topic for another episode. But it just seems, with the CPL being an indicator for who's making the West Indies side and kind of preparation, if he's not getting that much game time and Fletcher's doing so well, you can imagine it will be a quick swap around. Fletcher will come in as that sort of backup opener. But let's talk about the Patriots' other loss to Barbados as well. Another West Indies opener, Carl Mayers doing pretty well with the ball mash. With the bat, sorry, how did you kind of make his innings?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a good knock, right? So Mayers got 73 of 46 balls, went at a strike rate of 159. On paper, 6 fours, 4 sixes. On paper, it is what it is. Like, it's obvious that's a great knock, but he was dropped 3 times. So it is just worth pointing out, and that kind of echoes my earlier point about how bad the Patriots were in the field. But at the end of the day, if I get dropped 3 times, I better make sure I maximize on those drops, and that's what Carl Mayers did. So I can't knock that. He maximized on it. But funnily enough, the person I want to talk about in the Royal side isn't Mayers. I think, like I say, I think Mayers' position in the West Indies T20 setup is set. I think on comms at the time, Bish was talking about how Mayers has been, if you think about it, has made runs in every format this year. Runs in ODIs, 2 centuries. Runs in Test cricket, I think a century versus Bangladesh. Licked down England with the ball. Runs now in T20. So Mayers has been a multi-format player for us and done well club level, international level. He's probably the next player to start getting the big bags around the world, right? But the player I want to talk about briefly, Santokie, is Rakeem Cornwall.
Yeah.
Rakeem Cornwall has just come off a really good minor league cricket season in America. And obviously some of you listening or watching will be like, yeah, but minor league cricket, the bowling's not as strong. Okay, cool, whatever. He was still licking down the bowling for Atlanta Fire. The one thing about Rakeem Cornwall and why I like him so much, Santokie, is his attitude at the top of an innings is the perfect T20 attitude. I'm either hitting out or I'm getting out. What I'm not doing is defending and juking the ball for 1 and going at maybe 100 or sub 100. If I'm here, I'm going at 150 at all times. So Rakeem Cornwall in his innings, if I just recall the scorecard, Santokie, Rakeem Cornwall scored 39 of 25 balls at a strike rate of 156, 3 4s, 3 6s. Now, somebody on our Caribbean Cricket Podcast handle, in fact, it was Errol, messaged us and said, in fact, it wasn't Errol, sorry, it was Medvis, said, will West Indies ever consider someone like a Rakeem Cornwall because he's a guaranteed opener with one of the best strike rates in the Caribbean in that opener's role? And I said to Medvis, and I want to see what your viewpoint is, Santokie, I said no. I said no. And the reason why I said no is because it looks like, based on what's happened to him in red ball cricket, that his size or fitness or whatever it may be is now a barrier to selection. Because if it wasn't, he'd be in the test squad, right? So I don't see them overlooking that for T20 cricket either.
Yeah, so how I interpret it is Rakeem Cornwall, perhaps he bats like a pinch hitter, like an Orion, goes on ball 1 because he doesn't want to do the runs, maybe to preserve his fitness for that innings. But then as an opener, you're sort of limiting yourself because obviously fair enough with Narayan or someone who you move up the order, you've got nothing to lose. But if you're bringing in a specialist opener and they can only go one way, it's easy for high-level international sides to sort of work out your game, or high-level sides sort of work out your game. This guy's going to go from ball 1. This is how we target him. This is how we get him out. So for me, I think in the case of Rakeem Cornwall, they might see it as a limitation that he does go off on ball 1 because he's sort of trying to preserve his fitness when obviously in T20s as an opener, you will need to rotate strike. So I think that fitness issue with Rakeem Cornwall, unless he massively proves that he has improved his fitness, will always be a hindrance. Obviously his size, there's no getting around it as well. In selectors' minds, that will obviously play a part in kind of showing that he's not fit. So I think, as you said, he's performed well, but I definitely don't think we'll see him in the T20 side anytime soon. The test side, it seems like he has to work his way back, which, as we've called out on previous episodes, does seem to be unfair considering his record over the past few years.
Yeah, we'd be keen to hear, those who are watching, listening, we'd be keen to hear what your views are. So remember, you can message us. Well, if you're watching on YouTube, you can just put some comments below. But if you're listening via a streaming platform, you can message us at Carib Cricket, Twitter, Instagram. What do you feel about the Rakeem Cornwall situation? And then finally, Santokie, before we finish, you were watching this game. So I'd like you to kind of answer some questions for me. You caught the game between the Kings and the bookies' favourites, the Starboy team, the Trinbago Knight Riders. But let's focus on the Kings first, Santokie, because I remember when we did our CPL preview show on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast that we both said that the Kings squad looks light, right? It just doesn't look very strong, to the point where I was like, if any team ends below the Tallawahs, it's going to be the Kings. But what was even worse for the Kings, Santokie, is they had none of their overseas players. So Faf weren't there, Tim David wasn't there, David Weiss wasn't there. And when I saw the side, Santokie, it just looked like any T20 side, like the type of side you'd see in the old Caribbean T20, just some any T20 side. But you watched the game. Did it feel like that?
Yeah, no, 100%. I was literally going to echo those same words. It felt like Carib T20 Beer Banks tournament or something like that. And I think it sort of highlights how franchises, you need to plan for having squad depth, because they lost, because of the 100 still ongoing in England, David Rees, Faf du Plessis and Tim David, massive hitters for the side, were all out. And who did they get to replace Faf du Plessis? Playing his first ever T20 match, straight out of Kingston, Jamaica, Leroy Locke.
Leroy, you know.
I can't cuss him out, because he done an exceptional catch to get Dre Rush out later on in the match. But just opening 13 of 21 balls, but it wasn't even that. It was the fact how when the Rhyme was bowling the ball at him, he was playing it like the ball had dynamite in it. He was trying to scramble out. It just felt like a different level. And so for me, yeah, that kind of highlighted their problems. And then Johnson Charles went out early. Mark Dayal, he performed admirably. He was trying to build, but he just had no support until the end with Roshan Primus. But if you look at that middle order lineup, Roston Chase, he was out of form. Scott Kugelheim, they moved up the order. He went out for a first ball duck. Primus, Akeem, Azari Joseph. It's just very, very batting light. But to their credit, they did manage to kind of reel it in Trinbago's chase. And that does highlight questions. Are Trinbago as invincible as their lineup would suggest? I mean, we saw Nicholas Pooran and Andre Russell join the side, and people were kind of saying, all right, this is it, Trinbago are going to win. But they didn't look at their best yesterday. It'd be interesting to know whether that was just rust getting used to it, or if there are sort of weaknesses in their middle order in particular. So if we look at their innings, sort of Tion Webster was the highest scorer, but Pooran, Narayan, Dre Russ looked very out of sorts, not at 100% fitness level. You wonder whether the 100's kind of taken it out of him and moving to the Caribbean Premier League, which would be a concern. And then that middle order just looked like it wasn't as invincible as we know Trinbago to be in the past. It felt like they were missing, in the past, they've had a steady hand like a Ramdin or a Darren Bravo or a Lendl Simmons to kind of navigate the innings. It just feels like they're missing that. So from my perspective, I took it as, all right, St. Lucia performed badly. We're expecting that when Faf du Plessis, etc. come back, they're going to be stronger. Trinbago, this is their full squad, and they looked like they had a lot of fallibility. So for me, it'd be interesting, because it just sort of highlights that this isn't a simple case of Trinbago marching to the title as many have predicted.
I hear that, actually, but just to play devil's advocate and counter it, how much of that, though, do you feel was also because they knew they were going to win? So almost figuratively speaking, took the foot off the pedal, because they'd kind of, based on what they'd done to St. Lucia and St. Lucia batted, it was kind of like, yeah, well, we should like, was there a bit of arrogance about the performance, I guess is what I'm getting at? Was there a sense of, obviously we're going to win this game, but then a bit of complacency?
I think, yeah, partly it is to that, particularly Kyron Pollard's innings, because he was sort of knocking it around. He wasn't going for boundaries. But before that, Pooran and Russell kind of went out to sloppy shots. Russell in particular, he came at a point when the match was still in the balance, and he was sort of just swinging as if he was very, very tired. So for me, if Pooran and Russell aren't performing for this side, obviously it's only one game, it's hard to tell, then they're going to have massive issues. They'll be relying on Pollard to sort of carry that middle order and kind of finish. And again, looking at their top order, Narayan, he's going to come off one every 4 or 5 innings as a pinch hitting opener. So there is a lot of pressure on Tion Webster to kind of build that consistency. And he's not someone who's had that consistency in previous years or had that high-level experience. So, yeah, it'd be interesting. I think they will come back. Well, they won this match, but I think they will put in better performances going forward. But it just seems to me like what I'm trying to say is Guy and Amazon Warriors could do it this year, basically.
And, I mean, it is worth noting, people, as we record this, that that was game week 1. Game week 2 starts on Saturday the 3rd, and the Amazon Warriors are the only team yet to play. They will play 2 matches in game week 2, which is why we're yet to really analyse the Warriors. I think finally on Trinbago, I would just say that I suspect with Trinbago that they will always have the view that someone's going to come good. When you have, it's like Dream Team in basketball for the United States or something, when you have a team, or the Avengers, when you have a team that good, someone's gonna do something. And almost, if I was Trinbago, I'd almost look at that first game versus the Kings and be like, yeah, someone did something, and it was the player nobody expects it to be, Tion Webster. Now, if Tion Webster's doing something and I'm one of the other teams, I'm worried, because if he's coming off and the rest aren't, what happens when the rest come off? If you see what I mean. So it can be seen, it can be seen as a flip side as well. But
and we do have to obviously mention Akil Hussain took 4 wickets as well, valuable. He sort of cemented his place as our premier spinner. So great performance from Akil Hussain. Jaden Seals looked a bit off in that match. He went for a lot of runs, 38 off his 3 overs. But I think when you're at his age and his stage in his career, you're going to have matches as a bowler who bowls in sort of the death overs as well. You're going to take licks once in a while. So I think that's sort of expected. But it's good to see, similar to Mayers and Brandon King, it's good to see West Indies' first 11 players doing well in the CPL, because that's what you want to see regardless of what franchise they play for at the moment.
Yeah, and we should also shout out Alzari Joseph, because he took 4 for 13. And unbelievably, Santokie, this summer was the first ever T20 internationals Alzari Joseph has played for us. You would think that Alzari Joseph, whilst isn't a lock in, you would think we're going to be taking him to the T20 World Cup. So again, I think it's worth noting for everybody listening and watching that the kind of sub context to this year's CPL, or certainly the first 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks of it, is who's putting their hand up for T20 selection, because West Indies are going through World Cup qualifiers, and it's important to see the players performing in their roles that they are likely to have to play when it comes time to play for the West Indies as well. So we will turn to, over the weekend, to look at the Amazon Warriors to see if we can see similar performances from the likes of Hetmeyer, Odean Smith, Romario Shepherd, Kemo Paul, so on and so forth, to see if they can put their name in the conversation as well. But people, that's our kind of game week 1 review of CPL. By the time you're listening to this, we should be in the midst of game week 2, and maybe you'll be jumping in the comments to cuss down our hot takes that we've made about CPL. But all we're saying to you is this: we believe that this year's final is going to be Jamaica Tallawahs versus Guyana Amazon Warriors. That's basically what we're saying to you. So if you have a problem with that, by all means, get in touch with us. But Santokie, it's goodbye from me. Is it goodbye from you?
Yep, it's goodbye for me. And I'd love to tell you what our next episodes will be about. But as we always say, never a dull day in West Indies cricket. So who knows? You'll just have to stay locked for the next episode.
You heard him, people. Stay locked in.